You were told that if you just waited long enough, someone would come. You were waiting to be chosen before you let yourself believe you were worth choosing. Fiona knows this feeling before the first frame of Shrek even begins. She's been in that tower her whole life waiting, because she was told that waiting was the proof of her worthiness, that the right kind of woman endures, that love arrives for the people who are patient enough to stay in place until it finds them. And here is what nobody told her. The tower was never about keeping her safe. It was about keeping her small enough to need saving. Think about the first time someone made you feel like your value was conditional. Maybe you were young, or maybe it was so quiet you almost didn't register it as a message. A parent whose approval shifted depending on how well you performed, and you adapted. You learned which parts of yourself made people stay, and which parts made them pull back. Fiona does this in the most literal way possible. She transforms at night. The version of herself she can't control. The version she was told was monstrous. You've done this too. Maybe not with a physical transformation, but you have a version of yourself that only comes out in the dark, in the quiet, in the moments when no one is watching. The part of you that is angrier than you let on, needier than you admit, more uncertain than anyone around you knows. The part that has opinions you soften before you say them out loud, desires you talk yourself out of before they become demands, feelings you process alone because asking someone else to sit with them feels like too much to ask. You show people the version of yourself you have decided is safe to show, and you keep the rest in the tower. Here is what that costs over time. When you spend years presenting a curated version of yourself to the people you want to love you, and hiding the rest, you eventually lose the ability to tell the difference between who you actually are and who you have decided is acceptable. The performance becomes so automatic that stepping outside of it starts to feel dangerous. Like if they ever saw the real version, they would confirm everything you have been afraid of, that you are too much or something. That the version of you that exists in the dark is the reason no one has ever quite been able to love you the way you needed. Psychologist Carl Rogers spent decades researching the gap between what he called the real self and the ideal self, the version of you that actually exists and the version you believe you need to be in order to be worthy of love. His research found that the wider that gap becomes, the more psychological distress a person carries, not because they are broken, because performing a version of yourself that is not quite true is exhausting in a way that accumulates silently over years until the weight of it becomes impossible to ignore. Fiona has been carrying that weight her entire life, and the cruelest part of her story is not the tower. It is that she was put there by the people who were supposed to love her most. Her parents did not lock her away out of cruelty. They locked her away out of fear. Fear that the world would see the part of her they could not explain. Fear that her real self would make her unlovable to the kind of person they wanted for her. Fear that if anyone saw the whole of who she was, they would choose someone easier instead. And so they decided that hiding her was the same as protecting her. You know this dynamic, the parent who managed your emotions instead of validating them because your feelings were too big for them to sit with. Or even the friend who was present when you were performing fine and disappeared when you stopped. The people who claimed to love you, but only ever loved the parts of you that did not require anything difficult from them. They weren't saving you. They were honestly just managing you. And somewhere along the way, you started managing yourself on their behalf. You started anticipating which parts of you were too much before anyone had a chance to tell you. You started shrinking preemptively, making yourself easier, quieter, less demanding, less visible in the specific ways that had cost you before. And you called it growth. But it wasn't. It was adaptation to a wound that was never yours to carry. When Shrek arrives at the tower, he is not what Fiona expected. He's loud. He's messy. He doesn't show up with the right clothes or the right words, or even the right version of himself curated for her approval. He just kind of arrives, completely and unapologetically himself in a way that Fiona has never been allowed to be. And it terrifies her. It wasn't because he was ugly. It was honestly because he was free. Because watching someone exist without apology for who they are, when you have spent your entire life apologizing for yours, is one of the most disorienting experiences a person can have. You've probably felt this. The person in your life who said exactly what they thought without calculating whether it would be received well. who took up space without asking permission first, who expressed what they needed directly instead of hinting at it and hoping someone would figure it out, who seemed to exist in their own skin without the constant low-level negotiation with themselves about whether they were too much or not enough. And instead of feeling inspired, you felt something more complicated, a grief you could not name for the version of yourself that was never allowed to be that free, because somewhere along the way, freedom started feeling like a luxury other people had, the ones who had not been told early enough and clearly enough that their real self required management before it was safe to show. Fiona falls for Shrek, not because he rescues her. She falls for him because for the first time in her life, someone sees the parts of her she has been hiding and does not flinch. The moment he sees her transform and stays. The moment she is fully herself in all her messiness and contradiction, and he does not recoil, does not manage her, does not ask her to go back to the version he was more comfortable with. He just stays. And for someone who has spent their entire life waiting to be chosen by someone who would only ever love the curated version she decided was safe to show, that kind of presence is completely overwhelming, because it forces the question she has been avoiding. What if I have been hiding myself from people who would have stayed anyway? What if the version of me I have been locking in the tower at night was never the problem? That question is the most dangerous one a person can ask themselves, because if the answer is yes, then all the years of performing and managing and shrinking and waiting were not necessary. They were just the cost of being around people who could not handle the full version of you. And the grief of that realization is different from ordinary grief, because it is not about something you lost. It is about something you gave away voluntarily because you believed you had to. You did not have to. You just did not know that yet. Now here is where Fiona's story gets complicated in a way most people gloss over. She almost chooses Lord Farquaad anyway. Think about that for a moment. She has already met Shrek. She has already felt what it is like to be seen, to laugh without calculating whether it is too loud, to exist in the full version of herself without someone flinching. She has already had a taste of what it feels like when someone stays through the transformation instead of running from it. And she still almost goes back to the tower, not the literal one, the one inside her, the one built from years of being told that the acceptable version of love looks a specific way, that the right relationship comes with the right presentation, that a princess marries a king, and if that is not what she gets, then something must be wrong with her, rather than with the story she was handed. Lord Farquaad is the relationship that looks right from the outside. He has the castle, he has the title, he has the version of love that matches the blueprint she was given before she was old enough to question it. And even though something in her knows it is wrong, even though every part of her that has finally been allowed to breathe during her time with Shrek is telling her this is the wrong direction, she almost does it anyway. Because the blueprint is powerful, because the story you were given about what love is supposed to look like does not disappear just because you have experienced something that contradicts it, because choosing the thing that feels true over the thing that looks right requires a kind of courage that nobody prepared her for. You know this pull, the relationship you went back to because it was familiar, even though familiar had already shown you exactly what it was, the opportunity you did not take because it did not match the version of success you were taught to want, the version of yourself you suppressed again because the one time you let it out, someone made you feel like it was the problem, the blueprint reasserting itself even after you had already seen that it was wrong, because dismantling a belief system that was built into you before you had the language to question it is not a single moment of clarity. It is a daily choice, and most days, the blueprint wins, not because you are weak, because the blueprint is older than your ability to resist it, because it was installed in you at an age when you had no choice but to receive it as truth, because the people who gave it to you believed it themselves and handed it to you with love, even as they handed you the cage. Fiona does not escape the blueprint because she suddenly becomes brave. She escapes it because Shrek shows up at the wedding, because someone who has already seen the whole of her and chosen to stay anyway comes back. And in that moment, the blueprint loses its grip, not because she becomes a different person, because she finally has evidence strong enough to override the story she was given, that she is worth choosing, not the curated version, not the morning version that looks like what she was told love was supposed to want, the whole version, the night version, the one she has been hiding her entire life. That version is worth choosing. And here is the thing about finally receiving that evidence after a lifetime of waiting for it. It does not feel the way you imagined it would. You imagined it would feel like relief, like the weight finally lifting, like the version of yourself you have been managing could finally come out permanently because now you have proof it is safe. But it does not feel like that. It feels terrifying, because if this is real, if someone actually chose the whole of you and meant it, then you have to stop hiding, not just from them, from yourself. You have to stop pretending that the version in the tower is the problem and start letting it be the main character. And that is harder than the hiding, because the hiding at least gave you control. If you manage which parts of yourself people see, then you manage whether they stay or leave. You protect yourself from the specific devastation of being fully seen and still not chosen. You maintain the story that if you had just shown them more, they would have stayed. That the real you is still safe because it has never actually been tested. Stopping hiding means giving up that protection. It means letting the whole version of yourself be the thing that either gets chosen or does not. And that is the most vulnerable thing a person can do. Fiona does it anyway, not gracefully, not without fear. She does it in the middle of a wedding she almost went through with. She does it surrounded by people who are watching. She does it when the outcome is completely uncertain, and the risk of being fully seen and still not chosen is as real as it has ever been. She does it anyway, because the alternative is spending the rest of her life in a different kind of tower. The kind with no walls, the kind where you are technically free, but you are still performing, still managing, still showing people the version of yourself you have decided is safe, while the real one waits in the dark for a moment that keeps not arriving. You can live in that tower for a very long time without realizing you are in it. It looks like a normal life from the outside. You go to work, you maintain relationships, you show up for the people around you. Nothing is visibly wrong. Nobody would look at your life and see a cage. But you feel it. In the moments when someone gets close enough to see something real, and you immediately redirect. In the relationships where you are present, but not quite there. In the conversations where you say almost what you mean, but not quite. In the years that pass while you wait for the circumstances to be right enough to finally stop performing the version of yourself you decided was acceptable, and start being the one that is actually true. The circumstances are never going to be right enough. The right enough moment does not come. It does not come because the hiding is not a response to the circumstances. It is a response to the belief that the real version of you requires hiding, and that belief does not dissolve when the circumstances change. It dissolves when you decide it is no longer true. That decision is not a single moment. It is not a wedding interruption, or a kiss that breaks a curse, or a transformation that finally shows you who you were all along. It is 100 small moments of choosing to say the thing you actually mean instead of the softer version, of taking up the space you actually need instead of the smaller version, of expressing what you actually feel instead of the version that is easier for everyone else to receive. It is the daily practice of letting the night version of yourself exist in the daylight, not all at once, not perfectly, not without the old pull toward the tower reasserting itself on the hard days, just a little more honestly than yesterday. Fiona does not become a different person at the end of Shrek. She becomes more fully the person she always was, and the ending that feels like a fairy tale is actually something much more ordinary and much more hard-won than that. It is just a person who decided that the version of themselves they had been hiding was worth showing, and found out that it was. You have been in the tower long enough, not the literal one, your version, the one built from every moment someone made you feel like the real you required management, from every relationship where you learned that certain parts of yourself were safer, kept quiet, from every year of performing the acceptable version while the honest one waited for permission that never quite arrived. You have been waiting for someone to come and choose you out of it. But Fiona's story is not really about Shrek. It is about the moment she stopped waiting for someone else to decide she was worth saving and started deciding it herself. That moment is available to you, not when the circumstances are right now. In whatever small way you can manage today, let a little more of the real version out.